what I believe is there's really everything that happens before the customer buys the product, right? So before the customer actually like receives the food and eats it, right? So whether you get it, you're sitting at a table and you get the food and you're eating, or you're at home and you get a delivery. So what's everything that happened before that, and what's everything that happens after the sale, right? So pre-sale and post-sale. And Meez is really optimized for everything that happens pre-sale, right? So what that means is before you ever sell something, right, you have to make sure that it's profitable, right? Did you create a profitable menu, right? Are all your recipes optimized to be as profitable as possible? Do you know the profit margin of all those recipes? And I think more importantly, and this might be controversial, but I think way more importantly is, are you executing that food consistently?
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, CEO of Meez, Josh Sharkey. My man, Josh, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I am, Eric.
Dude, I know you're unstoppable. Honestly, really enjoyed our first conversation. I listened to it on the way down here to New York to connect with you. Oh. That was episode 780. It's an inspiring story, man. You started young.
What's this episode?
This is going to be episode 1169.
Okay, gotcha.
So that was 4 years ago. We're chipping away, man. But it was a great conversation. It's a conversation of starting young, really achieving. I think you won all these awards in culinary school. You went to go work for the greatest, and then you just had this idea. You found a pain point. Like, you lost your little notebook with all of your ingredients, and you just thought to yourself, I want this to be digitized. I need something to be digitized. And I think what you did is so amazing. You found a pain point. You couldn't find a solution, and you created a solution. And I think that is such a great life lesson, right, man? So that's where we were in 2021. You were one part Evernote for chefs, one part costing tool, and one part e-learning. I can't wait to find out what Meez is today. But before we get into it, let's get that motivational, inspirational, ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Yeah, well, I thought about it because you reminded me that I already had said something in the last podcast. But I'll say a question that I often ask myself, which is, how are you complicit in the conditions you say you don't want?
How are you complicit in the conditions you say you don't want? Unpackage that.
So very often we find ourselves, complaining is one way to say it, or upset or frustrated with the situation that we're in. It could be the way that our team is performing. It might be the way that an event transpired, or something that happened, good or bad. And oftentimes we get frustrated, forgetting that the most important thing is, what part of that can we control? Even if, let's just say you have a team member and they executed poorly, or they really screwed something up, right? The first thing is, I can't believe they did that. What's wrong with them? But I always find that if you start with, how am I complicit? What part did I have in this? Number one, it's a bit of a weight off your shoulders, right? Because then you get to figure out, okay, what can I control, right? So they did something wrong, but what environment did I create where that mistake could happen? And it's a great question that I literally ask myself daily, and a number of times throughout the day with things that are going on. Is, how am I complicit in this? Especially as a CEO, there's a lot of things that you don't do in the company that other people do. Yeah, and it's the same thing if you're a chef. You don't cook everything. Right, you have a whole team that cooks. So if you're a restaurant owner, there's a lot of people that do a lot of things, right? And things will go wrong, and it sometimes can be easier to jump to, why did they do that wrong? What the heck? What are they thinking? Why did they come in late? Why didn't they get their station set up? And it may be easier, but it actually is far more effective if you think about how you're complicit in that. What part did I play in this? Did I create the right structure for people to be able to get set up on time, to know how to do things the right way, to understand or learn the way that they need to learn? And it makes you better, and it will ultimately make your business better.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, is it Jocko Willink or Jocko Williams? You know what I'm talking about? Extreme ownership?
Oh, yeah.
Jocko. And that's the mindset. It's like, take like take ownership of everything that happens in your restaurant. If this is happening, why is it happening? What could I be doing differently to prevent that from happening? And what goes to my mind is like Meez is this e-learning platform. Like, oh, the food isn't coming out consistency. This idiot. Well, what did you do to empower your team, to give them the resources and the tools to make sure things are consistent?
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah, I think we oftentimes, I mean, look, as chefs, we do this all the time, but in general, not even just in the kitchen, we oftentimes are far more implicit than we think we are, and we need to be way more explicit. Not only because
define implicit. Like, what is that?
If you refer to a recipe, it's the same way that you would refer to a procedure or a way you want things done or a way you want people to think. Right? You might assume that people understand how you want it done.
Right.
Let's just say it's a salsa verde, right? And you have all the ingredients listed, right? You have the amounts, and then you just say blended until it's smooth, right?
Well, smooth is relative.
Well, smooth is relative, but also there's probably things that you're doing before that, right? Of course, you're gonna wash the herbs beforehand, right? Did you tell them that, right? You might actually want to take the little green interior of the garlic out, right? Because that could be a little bit more bitter, right? Did you tell them that, right? You might want to, make sure that you're, if you're using, I don't know, like onions, right? That you're taking the little interior of that, right?
Yeah.
There's these little things that you don't think about that you do, right? That you don't realize are, if not explained, will not happen every single time. And the more explicit you can be about from the way that you want a recipe to be executed to the way that you want people to think about how to cook food in your kitchen, or the way that you want people to think about the service in your restaurant, the more explicit you can be, the better, right? That's how you scale your vision. These are like, what are the sort of first principles that you use to make decisions? Does your team know that, right? Do they know how to think about that? And we're often far more implicit as operators than we realize we are. Yeah,
and you got to be explicit. You got to really like spell it out. Like no chance for interpretation. Like, this is how it's done. And with a great opening quote with a tool like Meez behind you, like that's what it's all about. Is really like taking out all the question marks. Like, this is how we do it, right?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it can be misconstrued as, as only referring to every single ingredient to the gram, when you're writing a recipe, which isn't really important. But we know if we're making a mostarda, let's say, and it's a peach mostarda, right? That peach is going to have a different sugar content, different Brix level. Like you want to be explicit about that, right? Try the peaches, right? How sweet are they, right? You might need a little less or a little more sugar depending on that, and that's also being explicit, right?
Yeah.
And all these things, result in you potentially being unhappy with the end result of the product. Be like, hey, why isn't this right?
Yeah.
And it's easier to say, hey, you didn't make this right, as opposed to what else could I do to help you make this right?
You know what blows my mind, and I won't mention names, but in our first conversation, you gave examples of your previous like job employment, right? And like how you're working for some amazing chefs, super talented chefs, Michelin star chefs. And even in those restaurants, you didn't know what the recipe was. Like, you didn't know, like there wasn't any standardization in these restaurants. You also went on to say that a lot of these restaurants you worked in weren't really making any money either, and I feel like it's this like almost like what's wrong with the industry where we're just so disjointed from like what it means to be responsible and like fiscally responsible. Like, how do we treat this like a business first and like reverse engineer it to make money? And that's where things like recipe costing, inventory, like all these disciplines, the parts of the job that aren't fun, that just have to happen, that you need to put tools in place, systems in place to make sure these things happen day to day. It just blows my mind that like at that Michelin star level, and I feel like we all aspire, so many young people aspire for the stars and for the awards, and it's amazing to me after speaking to a lot of these people how many of them aren't making money, but we're still holding that up on the pedestal.
Yeah, look, it's tough because this is why we exist at Meez, right? Is to try to help bridge the gap between creativity and profitability, right? And both should exist.
Yeah,
right?
There should be a balance for sure.
You don't want to get to a place where, it's great if you can scale to 100 locations of something, that's amazing.
It's great if
right?
you can scale to 15 or 20.
Yes. What is difficult is when you make compromises every step of the way in order to make it more and more executable, but less and less what your original vision was.
Right.
And this is part of look, this is just a challenge of the business that we're in, because we are both art and commerce, no matter how we look at it. There are obviously like very, very sort of opposite ends of the spectrum of how far you are towards art versus commerce, right? Like McDonald's is almost all commerce, right? Whereas 11 Madison Park maybe is all art, right? But it becomes difficult to see where the commerce piece needs to be involved, no matter where you are, because you're running a business regardless.
Yeah, I think that's where we could be better as an industry, is recognizing that there isn't enough marketplace for all of us to be doing art in our restaurants. There's only a small amount of consumer that can support the amount of labor and the cost of goods to do food at that level, in my opinion. I think that there's like this middle marketplace, like middle to high class people, or like middle to low class people who still need the convenience of like getting food because they have busy lives. But I feel like so many people just are targeting like that food as art demographic of people that can even afford to go out and eat like that on a regular basis. I don't know if there's enough market, like the top 1% of people can afford to go out and to like 11 Madison Park. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think that's definitely an extreme. The 3 Michelin star type restaurants, but there's a lot of really great sort of I don't even want to say in between, but restaurants that don't need to be 3 Michelin star, but that are amazing, and others that really can be amazing and profitable at the same time. Food does not have to be a 3 Michelin star restaurant to be incredible and innovative and special. But you do need to be able to execute that consistently over time, no matter where you're at. And just because something doesn't require 17 steps to plate doesn't mean it can't be amazing. And actually, most of the times it's the opposite, right? Like the most delicious food is not always the things that you're sitting down for for that 3 Michelin star restaurant for. So I think the pressure is really how do we make sure that we still feel like we are creating something special, but understanding that there's also this responsibility to embrace the commerce piece of what we do.
Well,
and
it's fiscal responsibility, yeah.
And it's not that they're not responsible. It's just that you tend to one can tend to overshadow the other, and it can make it feel like if you're focusing too much on commerce that it's jeopardizing your art. And I don't think that needs to be true. If you have the right tools and you approach the right way.
Yeah, I hear you. So in 2021, like I mentioned, you were one part e-learning, one part Evernote for chefs, and one part like costing. Like that's where Meez was in 2021. Paint the picture. Where's Meez today? I know you guys added inventory, you added nutrition. Like what else?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of we look to where the customer needs more help. So we certainly started as recipe management at its core, and it still is. To this day, we are maniacally focused on being the best recipe tool in the world, and it still is. Used primarily for storing, organizing, sharing, and training your recipes. I think where we have evolved, obviously, we've added things on like nutrition because people needed that, right? We started to see restaurants at scale, they needed to have nutrition, they needed allergens, things like that. So we wanted to do that in our way. And try to automate that as much as possible. We had a lot of customers that were asking to be able to count their recipes in inventory, and we're not able to do that. And so we built a way for them to do that, even if they're using another ERP system, like a Restaurant 365 or Restaurant System Pro or something like that. And I think where we have evolved more so on the data side is it's very clear that one of the most challenging things in every sort of level of restaurant, whether you are a mom and pop or you are a 1,000-unit chain, that it's incredibly difficult to ascertain your theoretical food cost, because it requires you to have all of the recipe data of all of your menu items, all the yields, all the conversions, really dialed in so that you can tie that to your sales and get a theoretical food cost. And if you don't know your theoretical food cost, then you have no benchmark of how well you're doing. So
Right.
you might have a 25% food cost in your restaurant, but if it turns out that actually your theoretical food cost is 20%, well, you're wasting 5%.
Yeah, where's that going?
Yeah, where's that going? So it might seem good that you have a 25% food cost, but turns out you're actually way off, right? Like a 2% delta is somewhat average, and of course you want to be as low as possible.
Yeah, there's always going to be some miscount.
There's always going to be some
whether
variance,
it's over portioning
Yeah.
or somebody pulling a fry from the, like somebody got a little snack, something fell on the ground, you didn't account for it.
That's right.
It's
That's
going
right.
to happen.
But if you don't know your benchmark, then you can't, you really can't improve, because you don't know what to, where you can improve. And that's where we're helping a lot more these days, right? Is we because we've made it so easy to get all of your recipes into Meez very quickly, and to structure all that recipe data, even if it's in some sort of Word format or PDF or something, where you can quickly import that into Meez, and all the yields, all the conversions are obviously like built out for you right away. So because we launched this menu product, so I think since we last talked about a year or so ago, maybe a year and a half ago, we launched a menu engineering tool. You can now understand your theoretical food cost, which is again something that I even underestimated how difficult it is for everyone to get this. So it's been a big help, and we're working on allowing folks to take this theoretical menu cost data and actually send it to their other systems. So if you're using an accounting platform or a reporting tool or another ERP or back office, that you can actually send this data there as well, so that you can use it for better reporting in those platforms as well. Because Meez is really meant for everything that happens, before you ever get to that report.
Got it. So it's the menu engineering elements of that you've developed over the past 4 years that enable you to do this theoretical food costing. And I think it's also, did I get that right in terms of like?
Well, menu engineering is really, it's funny because I think when you hear menu engineering, you think, here's a report of your menu sales, and that's not menu engineering. That's just a menu sales report. Menu engineering is a verb. It's to engineer. Like, when you value engineer, the build out of a restaurant, for example, an architect does this. They're sort of understanding where can my equipment schedule get shrunk down, or where can I save space and things like that. Menu engineering is menu value engineering, which is okay, where can I improve the price point of something, because that will I know what the impact of that will be on my total menu
the amount
cost.
of volume we're doing on this product, and it's relatively inexpensive, but we're selling a bunch of it.
Yeah,
Like, we can increase this by 25 cents. Customer will not feel that, but if we're doing this one item makes up 40% of what we sell or 30% of what we sell, then that super expensive item that maybe we can lower that a little bit to make it more approachable.
That's right. Or what? Turns out we're using similar batch recipes. We have a chimichurri and a salsa verde. I wonder if we could have some base and save on some prep time and improve our costs. Or I'm buying this this chickpea right now. What would happen if I bought this one? Well, how would that impact my overall menu cost because I use so many chickpeas or something?
Got it. So I think the other really cool thing that Meez is doing, and I think that this is just a life lesson, a business lesson, this idea of like having an abundance mentality, right? Like, you can look at Restaurant 365 as competition because they offer similar services. You could look at Restaurant Systems Pro as competition, but instead you're saying, well, how can we create a win-win situation? Like, I have so many customers using us because we're best in class for e-learning and scaling recipes. And like, that's what we do. We have these other things like costing and inventory that are conflict of interest with Restaurant 365 and Restaurant Systems Pro. So like, you could look at each other as competition, and you could say, no, we don't want to work with you, or you can choose to go further together. you know? And like, I think having that mindset of knowing your strengths and surrounding yourself with people who are strong where you're weak, like you don't have a general ledger tied to Meez. You don't have scheduling tied to Meez. But if you can take all the customers that you've attracted onto yourself because of how good you are at the e-learning and the recipe scaling, and you can create this win-win situation. Like, help me get into your mindset as to like how you navigate that.
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master of restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
So, and it's true, and I believe that for the better of the customers, the restaurants, we should be focused on the thing that we do really well,
yes,
and do that really well. The way that I think about it, it's funny because every year I bring my team somewhere from all over the world. We come together in one place because we're remote. This year I brought everyone to Cabo, and we do an all hands every 2 weeks with the whole company, but we do a big one whenever we meet together in person with everyone. And so this year we have a lot of new team members, and I wanted to sort of revisit where we sit in this whole sort of food tech ecosystem. And what I believe is there's really everything that happens before the customer buys the product, right? So before the customer actually like receives the food and eats it, right? So whether you get it, you're sitting at the table and you get the food and you're eating, or you're at home and you get a delivery. So what's everything that happened before that, and what's everything that happens after the sale, right? So pre-sale and post-sale. And Meez is really optimized for everything that happens pre-sale, right? So what that means is before you ever sell something, right, you have to make sure that it's profitable, right?
Costing.
Did you create a profitable menu,
right?
Are all your recipes optimized to be as profitable as possible? Do you know the profit margin of all those recipes? And I think more importantly, and this might be controversial, but I think way more importantly is, are you executing that food consistently?
Why is that controversial?
Well, I mean, you think about profits. I don't know if it's controversial, but profit is obviously you have to be profitable to stay to stay in business. But what I think anybody that's really good at operations knows is that the most important element of a successful business of any kind, and restaurants are no different, and restaurants maybe even more so, is consistency.
Yeah.
Can you deliver something consistent every single time? Because it's terrifying to go to a restaurant, have a delicious, meal. Maybe you had this awesome risotto, and then you go back the next time and it's completely different. It's this time it's dry, or the things were overcooked. You're like, I don't know if I can trust going back here again, so I probably won't, right? And I said this quote to you last time, which I believe is important in life in general, is that it's far more important what you can do consistently every single day than something that you can do incredibly well once, right? And that is for sure true in restaurants, right? You have to be consistent, right? So before you ever sell, before you ever look at a report of all the sales of your food, can you execute that food consistently every single day, right? That's imperative, right? And so where Meez sits in this whole sort of ecosystem is
that ecosystem before the sale and after the sale.
Yeah, before the sale and after the sale. So before the sale, right, you want to make sure that you are designing profitable menus, that you're building, the training that you need to make sure that everybody can execute well, that everybody knows what good looks like. They know like the source of truth of like where the where each recipe lives or where any of your sort of procedures live, and that you're building the building blocks of how to make sure that you execute consistently every single time, right? So you're designing like very profitable menus, and you're making sure they're executed well. That all has to happen before you ever look at a report of how much you sold, right, and how profitable you were. And if it doesn't matter how good that report is, how tight that report is, if you didn't do all that work beforehand, then what happens after the fact is kind of, well, you're gonna
right.
There's nothing you can really do about it, right? Now, those are important, right? So what happens after the sale, having good reporting, having a really, really good P&L, something that's like easy to build and easy to manage and easy to use is really important. Having really good reporting, having really good forecasting, these are all really important things too, right? We don't do that stuff, right? And I don't want to do those things because
it's a whole nother can
of worms, yeah. and it's a lot of work, and those are important for me. One where I think the biggest impact, personally, is helping people to make sure that they execute well and have proper menus, so that those reports that they look at are look good,
right.
Have the right numbers in them. Because I don't want you to see a report and be like, well, this is a really accurate report, and we lost a lot of money,
Yeah, I think it's just this mindset of choosing to go further together. You can do it at like the scale of like restaurant technology, like having OpenAI and working together, but also like in your community. Like some of the most successful restaurateurs, the biggest lessons I've learned is what I like to call like restaurant owner polyamory, where like everyone has their lane. You got this one person over here who's an amazing mixologist, and they can create the best bar programs, and they just have this wealth of knowledge with cocktails and wine, and they can develop programs. And you have this other person who's an amazing chef, and like that's what they do. You have this other person who's this amazing marketer, or like, and what you do is like you can like choose to like hoard your relationships, or you can choose to stay in your lane and just help different people. And then you have like this community of restaurant owners that come together. One person might have a stake in this business and that business, and they, you know what I mean? It's almost like it's partnerships, but like it's like kind of like offering your services to different partners instead of just like being all in on one restaurant group. Have you seen people? Like, does this ring a bell for you? Have you seen anything like that?
I mean, I think that's pretty endemic of the industry as a whole. I think we are a pretty collaborative industry. I mean, maybe on the restaurant tech side, it's slightly different. There's unfortunately, not as much of that collaboration as I'd like to see. But on the restaurant operations side, like restaurant owners and chefs, I think, it's far more collaborative, and there's also just far less risk of competition, because you're not going to go eat at the same restaurant every day in the same town, right? Yeah. Even if they're somewhat similar, you're not going to go to the same place every single day. Now, if Popeyes and KFC open right next to each other, you'd see some cannibalization there. That's probably not going to work, right? But if you have, like an Italian restaurant and a Spanish restaurant next to each other, there's not going to be that much cannibalization,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just think that mindset of choosing to be open, choosing to work with people who are strong where you're weak, or who might round off what you offer, you will always go further together. And I think it's in our nature to be tribal, to we all bring something special to a tribe. One person might be really good with like their mushroom knowledge, right? Like they go foraging and they know exactly what mushrooms to eat. Another person might be extremely athletic and they can go kill the deer, and like haul it back. Like, but when we all bring our unique strengths to the community, to the tribe, like the tribe is healthier, right? So I think that mindset in business communities, right? Like restaurateurs, like if you're in a city, like look at like other people and embrace their strengths and choose to learn from them, choose to benefit from each other's strengths. And I think if we take that and we blow it up even bigger, the world of like restaurant tech today, like now it's a nationwide marketplace, right? Or even like a global marketplace. I think the bigger you get, the almost like it almost narrows your ability to work with people, because it becomes about like owning the market, right? But if we change that and we are conscious, like consumers in the restaurant, like not like the guest consumer, but restaurant owners consuming restaurant technology, right? With our purchasing, and we like, I don't know, I think we could be really good about supporting the organizations that want to do what's best for the industry.
I mean, of course, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess what I'm saying is what I see with what you're doing and your ability to have partners to integrate with Restaurant 365, with Restaurant Systems Pro. I'm going to toot my horn here. I made the introduction between Josh and Fred Langley for Restaurant Systems Pro. And I'm so stoked you guys are actually going to be like integrating like that.
Yeah, we just started chatting, but it looks like there's definitely some interesting stuff we can do there.
But now as the restaurant owner, you get the best of both worlds. You know, you don't have to choose this or that. You can be stronger as a result of these restaurant technology companies choosing to work together. And I think that's the magic.
Yeah. No, look, there's nuance to that, right? That I try to make sure I'm honest about with myself, because yes, I have a pipe dream that like, in a perfect world, we are the recipe medium, and restaurants can use all kinds of other platforms, and we can pipe our recipe data to all those platforms, and it works all sort of hunky dory. But to your point, yeah, there's I think the bigger they get, the harder it is to partner together, and this data does need to be, I don't like using technical terms, but you do need to be able to unify and normalize this data if you're going to be sharing it with other systems. Otherwise, it doesn't work, and it's harder to do. We can't rely on the restaurant to be able to figure that out. We have to. It's incumbent upon us as on the tech side to figure it out.
Right. But I mean, so in this example with like a Restaurant Systems Pro and that integration, basically what the restaurant owner, consumer in this example, because they're consuming your products, what they would get is like your best in class e-learning platform, costing, and all that, like if you're putting all of your recipes into Meez, but you don't have what happens after the sale resources.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and this is what we do we do this with a number of companies, but again, to your point, we do not do a general ledger. We're not doing scheduling. We're not doing a lot of that reporting that something like an RSP or 365 will have. And but what we do is we have created a very structured way for you to take this recipe data that is set up really well in Meez, right? You're using these recipes to cook, to train, also to do R&D and to cost them, so you understand if they're profitable. But you can take the data, meaning like the structured sort of recipe data that you would then need in order to have the right reporting in another system, like in an ERP system.
Specifically costing, right? Like, so when you're like costing out your recipes and you're putting in like line item by line item, like what is all the inventory we have? What are all the purchases we have? How much of all these different purchases ingredients are in each one of our recipes? Where's the money going, right? So if you're using Meez, you can take all that data, right? And you can push that data into a Restaurant 365 or a Restaurant Systems Pro. Right.
Yeah, that's right. So you can take the data, you can export it, you kind of do whatever you want with it, right? You can put it in any system you want. We just make sure it's structured really well, so that I don't want to get too technical here, but there's a very specific way that your recipe data has to be structured in order for it to work in an ERP system. Like
what is ERP?
Well, ERP is really like a enterprise resource.
I call them enterprise solutions.
Yeah. But I'm saying ERP, but really it's 365. It's MarginNet. It's Workman. It's Restaurant Systems Pro. It's any of these systems where they have sort of this full suite of reporting and things like that. That reporting, to be clear, like if you want your like a full sort of picture of your business in the restaurant, meaning you want to know your food cost.
Actual versus theoretical.
If your actual and you want your theoretical, you have to have the recipe data. Without that recipe data, you have a half-baked version of your reporting, and it's really you're sort of flying blind. This is a very good example, right? I'll just try to like make it very kind of simple. I buy short ribs. Okay, short ribs cost whatever they cost, $14 a pound, $8 a pound, depending where you're buying from. I'm going to count my short ribs, right? I braise those short ribs. Okay, so now I'm losing, 40% of the short rib because I'm pulling the bone out. They also shrink, and that short rib also has red wine in it. It has a bunch of mirepoix. It's got some whatever else we're adding to it. Maybe it's got some port, and so I braise this thing. I need to count that short rib. I have to have I have to have a way to count how much braised short rib do I have as well. I can count my raw short ribs, but if all I'm doing is counting the raw short ribs, then I don't know how much I'm actually using. So I have to count the braised short rib as well. If I just counted 10 pounds of braised short rib and assumed it was 10 pounds of raw short rib, well, I'm going to be way off, right? I just, like we said, we probably lost 40% of that. And there's a bunch of other stuff in there. There's red wine.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're using a really good red wine, right? That's going to cost some money too. So if you don't have these recipes, then your inventory is totally inaccurate. And then you don't know what your theoretical cost is. And then you also have a very skewed sense of your actual cost if you're not counting and understanding, how much inventory you have on hand versus, how much you have left. So the recipe data is imperative, right?
Yeah.
And the reason, it isn't really the reason why we started Meez. The reason why we started Meez is much more novel, right? It's because I just wanted a badass recipe tool. But what I learned, over time of building it was, man, it's impossible to get. It is so hard to get your recipes into one of these inventory systems because they're not built for that. And that's okay. That's okay.
The inventory system's not built for recipes.
No, they're built for inventory, and so the recipes are sort of like an invoice of the recipe.
Yeah. And
that's not something you can kind of, refactor. You have to start from the beginning this way. You have to start with the intent of it being that. It's like if, it would be like if you're designing, the new engine for Tesla in your accounting platform, and that's where your engineers work off of for like the designs for your engine, right? They're different workflows,
right?
You can have an account of all the pieces of the engine in that platform. You can know how many, what are all the pieces, how much they'll cost, and that will add up to the cost of this engine. But you're not going to use that to actually like build the engine, right? And to like train people on how to do that. So they're just different. They're different workflows. And I think we until we came along, I think that was just what was understood was, oh yeah, that's where your recipes.
Yeah, but I mean the process of going through and filling out all the recipe cards, figuring out what the cost of every menu item is, that's a lot of work. Like that process of going through and like doing this work to know exactly what your the menu engineering, all this stuff, you don't want to do that twice, right? So the cool thing is if you're already using Meez, right, and you want to scale your operation, you want to improve your technology, and you want to get like a restaurant built general ledger, purchasing, costing, budgeting, all these tools on the post purchase level. Like now you can push all that data straight from your costing and your recipes straight to, I'm going to use the example of Restaurant Systems Pro because that's the one I know the most and it's what comes to my mind. The biggest challenge with implementing, say, a Restaurant Systems Pro is getting it up and going, is all the work you have to do in the back end to build out all those line items, to get the data into the system. And if you can just do that one time and have information flow, it's just so much better for the restaurant owner.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and again, the place where your team is going to look at those recipes, to scale those recipes, to update those recipes and iterate on them, and is not an accounting platform,
right?
And so there's just they're just two separate workflows.
Yeah, I'm looking at the content calendar right now, and this episode is scheduled to go live on March 24th. And I didn't even realize this actually works out perfectly on March. The next 4 weeks, I'm running a 4-part workshop series with Fred on the 4 must-have profit systems, and we cover all that post-purchase stuff. So it's actually good timing. So where was Meez in terms of like scale in 2021? How many clients would you say you had?
Oh God, I don't even remember, man. A lifetime ago.
I feel like you guys are just like killing it, and I'm just like stoked to see your growth.
Where
are you now?
There's over 30,000 kitchens using the tool. We have a free tool as well, so a lot of those are on the free tool. I think there's maybe like a few thousand on the paid tool, because again we want to just be your database of recipes no matter what. Like use the free one. Put all your recipes in there. When you're ready to do more, do more.
Would you say you had like 50? Like, have you grown by 100% since 2021? Would you say?
Oh, far more than that.
Yeah.
We were 3xing a couple of years in a row. Well, we like 9x'd, and then
That's awesome.
And then we 4x'd and then 3x'd, and then it's obviously as you get larger, it's harder to continue that sort of scale of growth. But
Right.
Not the vision, the purpose, the mission has not really changed since day one, which I'm really grateful for.
What is the vision? What is the purpose?
Well, we really do exist to bridge creativity and profitability. I think about you were talking about the restaurants that one that might go out of business and the ones that don't, right? It's funny because Bill Ackman, who's an incredible investor, now is somewhat famous for saying this. He's famous for many things, but recently, and I think it might have been a year ago, he said restaurants are our best investment. This guy's an incredible investor, right? He invested very early.
Something you would expect to hear from an investor.
Yeah, and he invested in Chipotle, right?
Okay.
And the premise there is that once you figure out the system, it is a really good business, but it's very difficult. One, to get to that scale, to be able to get to a scale where you can have those kinds of systems, and then to make sure that you can execute on those systems is very difficult as well. Like operational excellence, I think is underrated in terms of the viability of a business. So, I mean, it's really.
Hit me with his name one more time.
Oh, Bill Ackman.
Bill Ackman.
Yeah. He's.
I don't know if I'll be able to get him as a guest on the show.
Well, that would be that would be dope if you could.
But I'm gonna try. But I think you just said something that kind of struck a chord with me, and it's like, it's a good investment if you can help these restaurants get to a place where they can scale. Like it's getting to that point where, and I think where my mind went is to be able to invest in the systems and the technologies, right? Like you have to get to a certain point of cash flow where you can like standardize and invest technology. But I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that as Moore's law, like this idea that technology gets exponentially better, it also gets exponentially more affordable. So I think we're going to see a world where you can be a mom and pop and have a tech stack that rivals like the biggest restaurant corporations in the world.
Yeah, well, I think it's certainly far more. A lot of this is far more ubiquitous now. The adoption curve has really like hit a nice stride. I think that there's way more optionality now, which is great. To your point, it's a lot more affordable.
It's only the biggest, more affordable.
The biggest, the biggest leap that has to be made is just seeing that it's worth the time to embrace some of this technology, because when you're a single location restaurant, for example, I mean, I've been this before. You're thinking about payroll the next month. You're thinking about like, am I going to be able to make payroll? And every dollar counts. So it is. I think we oftentimes, what's the right word? I don't want to say underestimate, but we devalue the level of difficulty of these decisions as a restaurant operator to decide to invest in these things when the dollars are not.
Yeah, we
great.
look at our what do we have coming in, like what money is left over, and we think to ourselves, I can't afford this, but like what money will you save?
Exactly, but it is an investment, and it's not always an easy decision, you know. But the point I was making about why we exist is really that there are restaurants that have closed, that are incredible restaurants with incredible talented people that work their asses off, and they still close. And that's
a lot.
That's a shame. And it doesn't have to be that way. But my goal, why we exist, is to help more and more people not have that happen, right?
Yeah.
And every end of the spectrum, right? Whether you're small or you're large. And I think it's interesting because where Meez provides, I think, the most value right now is when you've hit some scale, right? Where you're at like 5 to maybe like 40, 50, locations.
Like the communication starts to crumble between locations.
Well, it's a number of things. One, problem scale, right? So the problem that you had at location one exponentially scales as you scale if you don't fix it. Two, maintaining consistency over all of those locations, whether they're the same brand or different brands, is really difficult, and that's where we help out a lot. And lastly, like if you have not optimized the profitability of your menu, those little numbers have a much bigger impact, right? So like 1% of a food cost on, $500,000, right, is like very small amount of money, right, over the course of a year. 1% on $100 million,
Right.
it's a lot of money, right? On $50 million, that's a big number, right? 0.5% is a lot. And so if you're talking about 3, 4, 5, 6%, which by the way happens all the time, where like you find 6% that you can improve just by engineering your menu, and because it's happened, I've seen it happen.
I mean, I can give an example real quick. We're hosting a profit power hour in the network, and there was this, I'll say his name because he's pretty public. Ronnie joined us, and our goal is to get him from 36% food costs to 30% of food costs. And we had him get a descending report of all of his purchases, and we had him look at his biggest purchase as a burger concept. It's like your typical like simple like in and out local burger joint. Their biggest purchase is French fries, and we found out that he was over portioning by like 4 grams. He was giving like almost 9 grams or like 8 grams of French fries when he's supposed to be, not grams, but ounces. Thank you. Of French fries when he's supposed to be portioning 5. Mm-hmm. So, like that alone right there, like I'm curious, how close are we going to help you get to your 30% food cost just by helping? Like if your biggest purchased and sold item is French fries and you're almost doubling the portion, like you don't think we're going to get close to finding 6%?
Yeah.
On the food cost right there. And that's just the power of inventory and purchasing and tracking and like looking at the data.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, oftentimes we might spend too much effort when Pareto's law comes into play a lot here, right? Where most of the time, 80% of the opportunity of, profit improvement or whatever the improvement is, in this case, let's say it's your menu profitability, your food costs. Most of the time, like 80% of your opportunity is
20% of the work.
Yeah, it's like 10 ingredients that you're using, right?
Yep.
It's literally like there's 10 things that if you just focused on not wasting those 10 things across all the menu items, and that's all you did, you would have a huge impact. But you have to know what those 10 things are, and you have to know precisely how much you're supposed to use of each of those things.
And that's what tracking does.
Yeah.
And that's what system. And I think where you were going with this train of thought is this idea as we move into the future. If I'm paraphrasing, I like to say we have to learn how to do more with less. We have to learn how to embrace technology because cost of labor is going up, food cost is going up. We're going to have to make sure every second counts. Every thing we're doing in our restaurant, we have to optimize it for efficiency. And the only way to do that is by leveraging technology today. Like, so whether that be Meez or a enterprise solution where you can track all the data. And the thing is, once you're seeing where your money is going and seeing how your effort is manifesting in numbers, that can draw you to where the opportunities are to start shaving 1% here and there. And it compounds.
Yeah. That's true. And I think there's another perspective that I think about, which is, of course, we need to be more efficient. We need to do more with less. Things cost more. The cost of goods has gone up far more than the perceived price point that we can actually charge for things in a restaurant. Those are all true.
Yeah, you just hit another. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, we can double click on that too. But the thing that I think is most exciting is that we can do more of the thing that we actually started this business for. When the beauty of technology is, especially, a lot of the stuff we're talking about, sort of back of the house or whatever it is replacing rote processes or things that are intended to be better done by computer or an algorithm or something as opposed to a person, right? There's a lot of those things, right? We don't need to do math. We don't need to be math experts, right? That's not why we started a restaurant business. We don't need to be organizational experts. That's not why we started a restaurant business. It's nice, it's fun. I love to organize. We started this to make people happy and to innovate and to be creative and to nurture that side of what we love. And we can do more of that. That's what's cool. That's what I find really exciting about how technology can help. And it's more than just technology, but how in this case technology can help is it's not that we're replacing people, but we're letting people like do the thing that they actually love to do.
Yeah,
and
that's interesting. That's
what I hope and I believe can start to become even more prevalent, is that you can spend more time on coming up with new dishes and iterating on the dishes that you have and taking bigger risks and things like that, because you understand and you understand the numbers, you know where you're at. It's the same sort of premise. It's funny, like very early on in my career, I learned a lesson. I was at Boulay because Boulay would always come in and change the menu. Like at 5:00, he'd come in, like throw a whole pig on the counter and bring some vegetables from his farm, and then literally right before service would just change the menu, and everybody would be upset, half upset, half not. But
sure, love that.
And also, but creating incredible food in that moment, right? And like taking some of the fat back of that pig right away and like gently rendering it and folding in some parsley juice, and it was really beautiful things, right? That could never happen if all of us didn't have our mise en place together. If we weren't incredibly organized and dialed in and had everything set. And the only way that you can really truly be creative and innovative in a restaurant is if you are really fucking organized.
Yeah.
And it seems counterintuitive. Like, wait a second, like art, we're supposed to be creative. We should be like sort of wild and free and spontaneous. And yes, but if you want to be spontaneous, you got to be organized.
Yeah. Are you still going with your train of thought?
No, go ahead.
So you're hitting on a bunch of stuff right now. So this 80-20 thing, Pareto's principle, it comes up time and time again. And I think that in life, so I think you've heard every action has an opposite and equal reaction, right? I believe that every truth has an opposite and equal truth. I think every, what's the other one? Like every truth, every action.
You should be in politics.
Well, there's every truth. Yeah. I mean, I think the truth is that we live in a very complex world, and there's in almost everything, positive, negative, there's this balance. And I think that there's like an optimal, like a sweet spot, like a point of peak performance that typically works out to be a near that 80-20 split. If like chaos and order is on this, like those are complete opposites, right? You would say you need to be organized. You need Meez, right? To be successful, you need to have systems, processes, procedures, protocols. That's the secret to success. But without a little chaos, you need that's the lubrication, the magic, the culture. Chaos is culture. Chaos is the human variable. You can't have one without the other. You have to find a split. And I would say that, what is that split in the world of restaurants? Is it 80% order in like discipline and 20% like creativity, chaos? Like there's these, like, whenever I'm learning something that is a hard truth, there is an equal and opposite hard truth. That is, you know what I'm saying? Like that, like, what is this balance?
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a great point. I think it's certainly a spectrum. I don't know if the spectrum starts at 80-20, but if you look at McDonald's, it's probably 100-0. And then if you look at,
11 Madison Park.
Or Massimo in Italy, it's maybe like, 20-80,
right.
But, and that's okay. And you give up some things for other things. But yeah, I think that's a choice you make when you start a business.
Well, that's the cool thing about the restaurant industry. And this is another thing that drove me crazy in all these interviews. Like, I started this podcast, I was looking for the path. What is the secret, the path to be successful in the restaurant industry? And the more I started getting into it, the more I realized I didn't know anything, because there is no single path. There's a million different destinations, paths you can take to get to that destination. So like to your point where like there's a spectrum, like are you trying to be an 11 Madison Park or are you trying to be a McDonald's? Like those are two different paths to take. And those are your leverage. Like it's a totally different approach, you know? So like what I think in order to, before you decide where you're going to go, you got to figure out like, who am I? What are my values? What are my strengths? Where are my opportunities? And you got to chart your own path that's uniquely custom fit to you in your situation.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think, something I think about often, especially when I'm talking to folks that are, you know, starting new businesses or it doesn't matter if it's a restaurant or not, is like, you know, does your vision meet your actions? And, you know, this happens a lot in restaurants, but it happens a lot in many businesses, you know, where you're not quite sure where you're at. You're not quite, you haven't really sort of chosen a lane. Once you choose a lane, then you can develop a very clear plan of like how you're going to execute. For example, right? If I am deciding I want to be, you know, I want to be the greatest restaurant in the world. I want to get 3 stars from Michelin. I want to get 4 stars from New York Times. I want to win a James Beard, right? There's very specific plan I have to put in place and actions I have to put in place. Now I have to stay in business, right? So that's important. But most importantly, I have to create food and an experience that is unbelievable, right? That is just like wowing on so many levels, right? And so there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of energy and time that I'm gonna need to put into that, right? And if I want to create the next Chipotle, right? I want 1,000 of this restaurant. Then I have a very different, you know, set of principles, but also set of, you know, processes and systems that I need to put in place, right? From day one, I have to know.
Both equally hard.
Both are equally hard. And there's obviously a huge like spectrum in between, but you know, what do you want to accomplish with your business? And then, you know, build it accordingly. You know, again, if you want to have, you know, a 1,000 unit group, you know, you're going to have to make sure that this is a thing that can scale. If from day one you're creating something that, you know, there's no possible way you could ever scale this idea, right? It takes, you know, 100, you know, hours of labor to create this one dish, right? And this is the thing that's going to, and there's not really a way to sort of do it differently to scale it, right? Okay, that's probably not a thing that you'll turn into a 1,000 unit location, right? So again, you just have to like be very clear that and ensure that whatever vision you have matches, you know, the actions that you're taking, and that then makes that will then sort of drive the choices you make in terms of the technology that you use, the people that you hire. You know, you're making me think. You know, I wrote down 3 goals this year. It was to get to 250 Restaurant Unstoppable Network members, to scale my email list to 10,000, and to begin the process, at least have a working syllabus outline of my first book, which I'm thinking about calling the Unstoppable Path. And it's kind of like a trick, because like in my mind, like this is the path. But once you open the book, you're going to realize that there is no path. The path is relative. So like, it's going to be like, okay, along your journey, like here are different paths you can take. And like, if you're taking these different paths, like here is an order of operation, how you can be intentional with your time going forward. You know, kind of like mapping it out. Like, you want to be a franchise, take this path. If you want to be a Michelin star, take this path. You know, so I love that idea, just these paths, you know, and that you have to realize that there is no one path in the industry. And I think that a lot of people, when they get into this industry, they see there are 2 paths. There's the extreme McDonald's path, and then there's the extreme Michelin path. Not everybody, but a lot of people. I think that can be a trap sometimes, because we tend to look at the best versions of something, and we forget that there's this middle market that is like a balance of those 2. That's probably the best path. Yeah. I mean, you're right. There's no, you know, most things, you know, to be truly successful are sort of one size fits one. And I don't think that's specific to restaurants. I just think in general, I say this a lot, like, you know, I don't take anybody's advice, but I index everyone's, because no one knows what your very specific, unique vision is of the world, of what you want to build, and or who you want to be, and what impact you want to have. And if you just literally take one person's advice or one group of people's advice and you apply that completely, without putting through the lens of like, what do I believe? What values do I have? What vision do I have? Then oftentimes you're gonna make a decision that is not optimal for yourself.
Yeah.
Because there's not, to your point, the way you put it is, there's not one path, and there's not one right way to do anything. You
Right.
can break a lot of rules, and they could still be the right way to do things, as long as you understand the vision of why you're doing it.
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master on restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
Yeah, back to the idea of 2 points, or like two things that are equally true. Like, you've heard the advice, say yes to everything, right? Early in your career, say yes to everything. Get the perspective. Like, to your point, index everyone's advice. Understand what different people have done to be their version of success. And then over time, as you're saying yes to opportunities, doing a 1 year here, 1 year here, 1 year here, in stages on the side, indexing all those perspectives, over time, you got to stop saying yes to everything, and you got to start saying no to everything. Until once you start getting that clarity of who you are and where you want to be, what are the specific things I need to start saying yes to, the intentional things to get to where I'm going. So it's like, to your point, like, get as much perspective as possible, and like index these perspectives, and then cherry pick all those the nuggets you've learned from different perspectives to create your own path.
Sure. Yeah. Look, I think not everybody should start a business. I think that you don't, if you can't not start a business, you probably shouldn't. Like, it needs to be something that you couldn't live with yourself if you didn't. And typically that means that you have a very clear vision. I would advise folks to spend a lot more time thinking about not how to do something, but why they want to do it. Yeah. And be really, really, honest with yourself, like, why you want to do this. Because if you, anything you're going to do, if you want to be great, it's going to be really fucking hard. Yeah. It's going to take a long time, and you're going to make a lot of wrong decisions. Right. And that's okay, but if you aren't like crystal clear on like why you're doing it, and you can't remind yourself of that often, it doesn't matter how much good advice you get, or how many right decisions you make, it's going to be very hard to sustain.
Yeah. Well, they say you can deal with any how if you have the right why.
I haven't heard that. That's good.
Yeah. Darren Hardy, I believe, quoted that one, or maybe that's Brian Tracy. I can't remember. You said something earlier that I kind of wanted to circle back to. The cost exceeds the perception of the value. There's this issue right now where the cost of goods going up, labor is going up, people are going out, and the consumer's like, what the hell? $18 for a burger? This is ludicrous. I think I've identified that as probably the biggest challenge right now for restaurant owners, that they know that they have to increase their prices, but they are terrified to, because the consumer won't accept it. How do we overcome that hurdle?
Man, I wish it's a very hard problem. I talked about this last year a lot with on our show, and we aren't able to charge what we need to in the restaurant, and that's because of the perception of what things should cost. And when you pay for that burger, you're not just paying for the ingredients in that burger. You're paying, and you're not just paying for the person that's going to serve that burger to you. And you're not just paying for the person that's going to cook that burger for you. You're also paying for the environment that you're sitting in, right? The music that someone chose.
Yeah.
You're paying for someone that's cleaning up the table after you. You're paying for someone that's making sure that the place that you're in is clean all the time. You're paying for the feeling that you're getting. Otherwise, you could be at home and buy some burger meat and make it, and then you could clean up after yourself, and you want to have a date with your wife, and you could put some beautiful music on and some candles, and you could make sure that like your table set up really nicely, and it feels seamless to both of you. You could do all that stuff. It'll be a lot of work, and by the way, you should, and I think that's amazing, right? But all of those things, right? All of those things that you want to do take a lot of effort and planning and thought. And you're going to think about how you want that dinner to be special for you and your girlfriend or your wife or your boyfriend. And you can do that, or you can outsource it to somebody else. And by the way, if you outsource it to somebody else, it should cost more because you're outsourcing it, and it always costs more to outsource something. And it's funny, but in many industries, we pay for the experience on top of paying for the product, right? So if you go to a spa, right, you're paying for the luxury of being at that spa, right? Because again, when you go to a restaurant, just as the same as you go to a spa, you're paying for them to keep it warm in the winter. You're paying for it to keep it cold in the summer. You're paying for the airflow to be right and the makeup air to be. You're paying for all these things. If you go to a spa, you're paying for them to keep that water warm. You're paying for that experience, right? But you might get a smoothie, and you might get a salad, right? You're paying for that too, on top of paying for the experience of being in this place, And a restaurant is an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Look, there's varying degrees of that experience. Obviously, you go to a fast food place, it's very different from the experience at a
You're
sit-down
looking to
restaurant.
experience convenience or luxury.
Yeah, and again, you might be paying for speed,
Right.
Which is also something, right? Like if I have to get to a meeting in 20 minutes, right, and I want lunch, and I want to make a salad, it will cost me whatever it cost me at home. Okay, fine. But do I have the time to make it? If I do, that's great. If I don't, I need to pay somebody for that time.
Right.
And I'm not just paying for the time it takes them to cook it. I'm paying because it's faster for them to make it so I can get to my meeting on time.
Yeah. Have you heard of The Experience Economy, Joe Pine? Great book. I had him on the show. He's actually writing his next book. His argument is that we went from the service economy to the experience economy, and now we're going into the transformation economy. But in that book, he talks about just everything that you just discussed, that we're not in the business of selling goods in products as much as we're in the experience of selling experiences. And when you understand that, the game totally changes, because now you can literally charge whatever you want depending on what experience you're able to deliver.
Well, I think that's the argument we're talking about, though, is that I don't know if you can, even if you do, in a restaurant, to be at a place that's a nice neighborhood spot, right? If you can charge for the experience that you're
Well, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, I think that there's a perception of what things should cost no matter what, right? And maybe that will change, but the margins in the restaurant business are obviously much lower than the margins in other businesses. Right. And it's just because.
Well, I think it brings us back to that spectrum before of extreme luxury and convenience, right? And I think that as we go into the future of restaurants, you're going to see that spectrum diversify a lot more. I think the most successful restaurateurs are going to figure out how to meet people at different points in that spectrum of ultra touch, high service, experiential based. And I want something as with the convenience of one tap on my phone, and I want it brought to me. Those are two different experiences, but there's value to both, right? But there's also that middle ground, and there's like, I think that middle ground has that there's so much opportunity in that, and like figuring out how do I deliver value, but do it with as little people as possible and like cost as possible. And I think there's so much opportunity there, and you're seeing it happen with there's more and more like Bar Taco, I think is a great example. I've had them on the show a few times, and you go to a Bar Taco and it used to be, you have have you been to a Bar Taco before?
Actually haven't.
Okay. So the experience is you sit down and you put like, you can like basically build your own taco. You check the ingredients you want. It goes to the kitchen and then they bring you the food. There's like food runners. They're called like service leads essentially, where they're like kind of like managers, but they're also servers, but they're like, they get zones. And if you're in their zone, like they're making sure that you have everything you need, but they're not your server. They're like just delivering service, like hospitality, but they're not taking your order. You know, like you're doing the work. Same idea with a QR code or something like that. So I think you're starting to see these hybrid models where there's service, but like you can do a whole lot more or less because the guest is taking care of themselves in terms of like they have the heavy lifting of like putting the order in. You're just scanning the room and making sure like you're more of a host at this point, where you're just making sure you have eyesight, like lines of sight, and you're just scanning, making sure is every table look happy. Yeah. Right. So you can lean on technology, right? Just like we would lean on Meez in the back of house, you can lean on these services in the front of house. But in the back of house, what you're doing now is you're not trying to like be everything to everybody. You're like, no, we serve pizza. That's what we do. If you want pizza, come here. If you want a chicken sandwich, come here. If you like, so they're doing one thing really well, but then they're creating a very comfortable space, so they can do more. And I think you're just gonna see like the world of restaurants, especially in the cities, is fragment. People are gonna stay in their lane, so they can put their resources to doing one thing really well. Do you disagree with that?
No, I don't. I think a lot of that happens already. It is interesting that I was literally just talking about this with Ben Pryor yesterday. Ben Pryor. He's got a company called Fortop. He used to be the head of innovation at Spot On. Yeah. He was in restaurants for like 30 years, and now he's got a technology company. Anyways, we were talking.
What's the technology company?
Fortop.
Fortop.
They do like data services, data integration for larger scale restaurants.
He was with Spot On before?
He was Spot On.
That's a company.
Spent a lot of time on like Breaker and things like that. Anyways, the point being, I brought what you were just talking about. I brought this up because I think that there's this really interesting opportunity that I might just have to do, because a lot of it involves the menu, the menu like information, like recipes and things like that. But I do think that there's an opportunity to improve the service of a restaurant and improve the labor and make the guest happier.
What does that look like?
So I'll share a couple of anecdotes. I just shared this recently, by the way, as well. But like, I mean, and by the way, this happens all the time. Like, I get to a restaurant, maybe I'm with my wife, and we sit down, and it's, server might take 5-10 minutes to get there. They're busy. But more importantly, once they get there, I have all these questions about the menu, and maybe it's a nice restaurant, and I want to know information about the menu, and I want to know like, okay, what cocktail should I order? Tell me about this cocktail. It only has 3 ingredients in it. I'm not clear like what it actually is. Maybe the server doesn't actually know, right? They have some sort of semblance of it, but this has happened to me, by the way, where like they just kind of give me this answer. I'm like, okay, clearly you don't know what this cocktail is. And yes, you can train them better, right? But maybe I have a question about like one of the ingredients in the cocktail. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting spirit. I never heard of that, but what is that, right? And maybe they don't know. It's a lot of stuff for them to remember, right? On top of just being personable and making us feel good. And I think there's this opportunity where when you get to the table, we all have phones. Why can't we, just to start getting some orders in right away, and also ask any question we want about this menu, and the restaurant can be intentional about like making sure that again, we can solve a lot of this with tech and AI and things like that, but like making sure that every question could be answered in as much depth as you want, right? So
I'm doing that when I go out to eat. Like I'll see something on like an Indian like restaurant menu. I'm like, I have no idea what that is. Or like a Thai restaurant. I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, I don't want to look like an idiot. Like I'll Google it at the table, see what it looks like, and then I'll be like, how do you pronounce this? So when I order it, I don't feel like a schmuck.
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, we can train our servers to do that, but I think there's this really cool opportunity where there's so much information there, right? There's a surface level things like, okay, I'm allergic to allium. Okay, I want to know anything that doesn't have allium, right? Let's say that I'm not, by the way, but like let's just say I am, right? Or I don't like lemongrass or something. Hopefully everybody likes lemongrass, but like let's just say you don't, and whatever, you have these particulars, right? And you want to know, and any question you have about that menu, a computer is going to be able to answer that way better, right? And on top of that, you might then the restaurant might actually want to share some more personal information about this. Like maybe this is, there's to your point, you're at a Thai restaurant. Okay, cow soy is in the menu. Cool. Most people know what cow soy is. Maybe I don't, and I want to know what cow soy is. Okay, cool. But maybe also the restaurant owners are a married couple, and they traveled to Thailand, and this was the first dish they had together, and it was the reason why they sort of fell in love, and the chefs created this dish in memory of this thing, and what they learned there was that they actually found this really cool lime, and that's what they're using in this thing, and that's really interesting information, right? Because cow soy is made in a lot of places, and hopefully it's also delicious, but it'd be really interesting to know those things. And again, how many of these things can your server remember, and do they have time to share with you when they're trying to service all these other tables? And I just think that there's this opportunity to provide basically anything you want to know about this menu and more. And then, as you're asking about the cow soy, them say, it knowing like, hey, you know what? I actually think that don't know if this would be a good pairing or not, but like this Sancerre we have would be delicious with that. And the producer of the Sancerre's name is, Robert, and he's got 17 puppies that he, like interesting information and an upsell and more information than a surface.
So
to be able to
tying
remember.
AI into this data mining like guest experience.
Yeah, because it's one, you're going to get precise information. I mean, hopefully if you again, if you have control over the information that you're sharing, and I think it can just be a better experience, and you can get to the table and have the power to order right away, even if your server is coming. I have 2 kids. Like as soon as we hit the table, I want to get my kids' order in because there's only so much time before they're gonna freak out.
Right.
And I want to make sure that we get in there, their order really quickly. And that way I can just sit down and do that. So
sounds like a project for Noah Glass. I feel like if he gets his hands on that idea with Olo, interesting things could happen. Did I introduce you to Susan Abbott?
I don't think so.
So Susan Abbott is the founder and CEO of Know My Menu, and she's doing something very similar where, so her story is she is a very conscious eater. She got very sick and she chose to change her diet, and she was able to kind of heal herself with food. But now when she goes out, she doesn't have like allergies, but like she wants to know what's in every recipe. So like she's asking all these questions. Is there seed oil? Is it this? Is it that? Like I want like a clean menu. And I think that consumer is only going, that type of consumer is only going to increase as the consumer gets more and more knowledgeable about what they're putting into their body. Like we're learning so much about diet right now and like reverse engineering food for health. Right? What's going on with seed oils, and like all these different things, GMOs, or like all these variables that affect our health. More and more consumers are going to want to know exactly what are the ingredients. What do you, not only like what are the ingredients, but what are you cooking it in? But so she basically created this tool where you can put in like your dietary aversions, and it will eliminate everything on the menu that has that, right? So now you aren't being tempted by all the things you can't have, but it will also help you find where these places are who can cater to your dietary needs. Yeah, it's called Know My Menu.
It's interesting. There's a company called Foodini that does a similar thing as well. Yeah.
Interesting. I think that you're onto something there though, that there's an opportunity in just the using your menu as like a source of like, not just like what are we serving, but like a more like
there's the utilitarian piece of that, which is important, right?
Yeah.
But that part is far more important to be accurate, by the way. So in that regard, it's imperative that you have the actual like restaurants information, not like, I mean, there's a bunch of AI tools that can like look at a menu and tell you it might have these ingredients, but if you're allergic to garlic, you want to fucking know that thing,
Right.
because they might not use garlic, who knows? But the utilitarian piece is really important, right?
Yeah.
Like I have an allergy, I want to eat this way. But again, we are also delivering an experience, and there's also a lot of interesting, information, and storytelling is really important, right? I want to know why. Why do you have this dish on the menu? You know,
Right.
why did you choose this? And if I'm the restaurant operator, if I'm the chef, if I'm the, I want you to know that too, because it might just seem innocuous that like I have this one, dish or this one, cocktail or something, but there could be something more interesting about why it's on the menu, or something that is more personal, and that affects the experience. That affects how you feel about something. Like, as a chef, we come to the table, like when we have, if you have friends over and you're cooking, you bring this thing out and you talk about it, and it's like you have that time to interface. Any chef will tell you this. Like, you want to
that's an
talk about the food a
experience.
bit, right?
Yeah.
But you make it more personal, and it just tastes better, by the way, right? And it feels better. And I think that there's a lot that you can do there, in addition to the sort of utilitarian piece to create a better experience.
Yeah. You said something earlier that I want to bring back to the surface. You were talking about the future with AI, and we're going to have to learn how to lean more on technology. You should embrace it, because it's going to let us connect with what it means to be human, like the human side of like delivering the service and connecting with our communities. I think about what you said there, and it made me think of, I think what's happening in the bigger picture of like the world we live in, with more, like you're going to see more white collar jobs go away to AI, and quantum physics and machine learning and robotics in the blue collar world. So I think that as jobs start getting automated and outsourced to technology instead of people, a lot of people, these people that are being displaced, where are they going to go? They're losing their jobs.
So, I mean, look, there's a lot to unpack there. I think in the restaurant space, it's a very long time before, for example, robots become ubiquitous, because there's an infrastructure piece.
I agree.
But there's a lot. Look, there's a lot of things in sort of the, what would you call it, like the G&A side that probably can be optimized. But I think this conversation is not a new conversation.
What's
right?
G&A?
So G&A is like, if you think of the P&L, there's the there's prime costs, right? There's OpEx, and then there's the admin and the admin costs, things like that, general admin. But this conversation is not new. It's happened. It's happened many times throughout the years, and I think what we don't know, and it's almost impossible to predict, is what are the new jobs that get created because of this. Because humans are pretty, there's a lot of ingenuity that we take for granted. There's already a bunch of new jobs that are created because of you. You have a podcast, right? This is basically your job, right? That didn't exist 40 years ago. You couldn't do that. Right. It does today, right? There's people that have YouTubers that are just, that's their job, right? That didn't exist. And each time there's sort of a new step function, like improvement in technology, we have this fear of like, well, all of our jobs are going to go away, forgetting that there's all these new things that will be created. I'm not going to begin to try to even speculate what they are, but I know that they are there. I mean, for example, if I just thought of one, right, is that, this is more on the servicing restaurants, not for restaurants, but, every restaurant might have their own unique, module that's AI powered, that's specific to everything that they do, instead of a whole bunch of these other technologies, or that's bespoke to them, right? And it'll be far more cost effective, and there might be a service that just helps you build that for your restaurant, and it's sort of this evergreen thing. Who knows? There's likely a lot of things that we're not thinking about that could be new services in a restaurant, because they don't need as many people doing X, Y, and Z. Right. I don't know, but what I do know is that we don't know. And the idea that everybody's just going to lose their job, I think if it did happen, it's not going to be for a long time, at least at scale. And I think that along the way, a lot of new opportunities are going to be created.
So where I was going with that train of thought, and I agree with you 100%. I think I'm hopeful for the hospitality industry, because I think that as AI progresses and as machine learning progresses and as quantum physics and quantum computing, that world, all those things start to like slingshot off of each other. I think what's going to go to the wayside faster is going to be the corporate and like the white collar jobs. And why I think this is a good thing is because it's going to bring opportunity. Like, where are people going to go? They're going to go back to what it means to be human. And I think that is back to, we're going to get closer to food. And I think you're seeing this trend happening right now where people are getting closer to food. People are realizing, okay, what we've been eating, what we've been doing isn't good for us. It's not good for the environment. And if we really want to be the healthiest versions of ourselves, it's about supporting a healthy food system. And if you look at humans over like the span of evolution, like food has literally been the thing that our evolution is hinged on, how we find it and how we grow it. And we have evolved side by side with food and our ability to influence how we get in food and scale food, right? If you think it's going to be any different in the future, like, why would it be any different? So I think that we kind of swung away from this idea of like what food was, our relationship. We've kind of gotten away from our relationship with food. I think we're starting to swing back to it. I hope we're swinging back to it as we get more and more data on like what happens to our cells when we put bad food into our systems. And like, not just the food and like what we're putting into our systems, but the act of being a part of a tribe that produces food. Like, you have hunters and you have gatherers. We go out, we grow and we get the food, and we come together and we share it around a table. Like, we've kind of gotten distant from that. Do you agree or disagree with that?
For sure we are. I mean, there's not a lot of hunters that are hunting in order to sustain themselves.
We got so good at food that we've removed our, like, it's like this thing we take for granted, but it's literally life. Food is life. Food was once living, like when we look at it, it's literally defined as a commodity or a good. Like, it's literally life. It's this thing that we share with all the things that we're putting into our body. This, like, unless it's salt.
Yeah. Look, I
minerals.
I totally agree. Because I love to know where my food comes from, and that's very important to me. I don't know if that's necessarily. I don't see where that's becoming something that will revert back to as a culture. I think the importance of our bodies, I think, is becoming a lot more closer to each person, because we understand the impact of each thing. We have more control over it. We can sort of biohack, things far more than we ever could before. So knowing precisely the thing that you should be eating specific to your own, microbiome and things like that I think there'll be a lot more of that.
And that's a perfect example of going into the transformation economy. So we're in the experience economy right now, but we're heading into the transformation economy. And I think that that's where the opportunity for restaurants is looking at food as medicine. And you're seeing a lot of people who are like taking this path where they're focusing on creating food that's meant to be fuel or meant to cure. And like, you're here in your journey to improve your health. We're going to get you here. We're going to transform you to a healthier version of yourself. And it's just not just this experience that you're going out for one night. It's an experience over 5 years of you becoming a better version of yourself. And we're going to help you get there. That's the transformation economy. And that's where supposedly we're heading. Or maybe it's this transformation of like, you're lonely and you're unhappy. Well, come join our community. Be a part of our community, where these are our values, and our values that we have in the four walls of this restaurant with our staff spill over into our community. So we're transforming our community by injecting better values into our community, about lifting up our community, about educating our community on where you can go get food to support your farmers. That's the transformation economy. And supposedly that's where we're heading.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's beautiful.
But I think, to your point, to come full circle, is we're going to lean on automation, AI, and all these things to free up human bandwidth. And that bandwidth has to go somewhere. And I think it's going to go to fixing the broken food system and making communities better, because we're going to have bandwidth to focus on what matters most: food and relationships.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the hope. And
that's my goal. I mean, like, I would love to see that world. How do we like make that a thing?
Well, I think you're right. The more time we have to dedicate it to it, the more we can.
I can't tell if you think I'm spinning. Like, do you think I'm a crazy person right now?
No, I don't think you're crazy at all. And I'm processing what you're saying. I tend to be far more sort of pragmatic or realistic as opposed I shy away from being as idealistic as maybe I should be when it relates to things that are not something that I control. So I think it's a beautiful thing. I think that there's definitely a world where, because we have a lot more time, there'll be a lot more opportunity to embrace that. I hope that's the case.
There's a powerful book out there. I tried to get the author of this book on the show. It's called Power in Progress by Daron Akmoglu. If I'm saying your name incorrectly, I apologize. And Simon Johnson is co-authored, and it's basically like this anthropological approach over 1,000 years of the struggle over technology and prosperity. So it's like, okay, as technology has been improving, like, who's the beneficiary of this technology? And over history, generally speaking, it's the people who own the technology that are truly the biggest beneficiaries of the technology. That, like, so you look at like the mills, like when we started grinding, grain, and we could like mass produce flour. It was the kings that owned the mills that really prospered from it. The people who were farming weren't really prospering, so like, I guess where I'm going with this, time and time again, as technology gets better, and I think what I'm tying this to is what you were saying earlier with, as new technology emerges, new opportunity emerges, right? So you used me as an example. I think what we have to be wary about is, as new technology emerges, example AI, we have to be really careful about who owns that AI, who controls that AI. Because in a global marketplace, there's only so much room for people at the top. And humans gravitate towards number one, the best solution. You know what I'm saying? See where I'm going with this?
Yeah, no, I do. Oh, yeah, I think obviously, there's a big push for a lot of these models to be open source, and for sure not one company should own, nor will they, by the way, because again, there's basically, if you think about technology, there's two applications. There's consumer technology and enterprise or business technology, and technology, there's a lot more money spent on that. There may not be more money spent on enterprise technology, but technology for businesses. But businesses want optionality. They're not going to the market won't settle for one provider, unless it's a zero sum, and AI does not seem to be a zero sum.
Right.
Like search, for example, is kind of zero sum, right? There's basically one search
Google
engine. Yeah.
Well, that was going to be, but keep going. I'm going to come back.
But I think again, I think we continually as a civilization benefit from technology, and I think what's first and one that's important is to frame when we say technology, what it means, because it's not just computers. It's just any sort of innovation. There's a great book that you probably know of that everybody should read called Wealth of Nations. Adam Smith was actually written in the 1700s, but it still applies.
We're coming back to that.
Yeah, well, it still applies today, and I think it's just the
was it Milton Friedman who came out like 100 years after that, or 200 years, and he said basically it's the job of an organization is to return profit to its stakeholders, and that kind of like changed the was it Adam something Adams, say his name again.
I believe it's Adam Smith.
Adam Smith. Thank you very much. There's like that. Like again, that's like the yin and the yang.
Well, yeah. The point being is that like technology, typically what it does is it at least what I believe is it allows in aggregate the entire society to be able to do more than it could before, right? So when we started seeing innovation in or industrialization of equipment in farming, things like that. Farmers, certainly were impacted in some ways negatively, but there's also less farmers. We didn't have as many farmers anymore. And then what did they do? they went to do other things, right? They didn't, we didn't just lose all these folks. They ended up doing other things. And that continues to happen, right? Humans tend to be pretty, there's a lot of ingenuity, and we find more things to do. We find more ways to spend our time, and that's how we actually evolve as people, right? Before we had any technology, all we could do was go hunt for food, to your point, right? And then each time we're able to do more things.
Yeah, then agriculture.
Then you're able to start, other businesses, and you can have, someone that makes the shoes, and someone makes this, and then you as technology grows, you're able to do more things, and we get to a place where, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like a lot of them are now met, right? Now there's some negative impacts of that, where humans tend to try to find struggle or drama because their needs are met, but there's also a lot of innovation that happens, a lot of just net new opportunities that we have to do things that we couldn't do before, and spend time on things that we couldn't spend time before. So to your point, maybe that means actually that we can spend more time on local agriculture and farming and eating better. It certainly means that there's going to be more time to do things that we didn't have time to do before. What that is, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's complicated. I think it's a complex issue, and there's not a simple solution. But you use me as an example. Like, I wanted to work in the restaurant industry. That wasn't an option for me because of the amount of debt I had. I had to go figure out how to be an entrepreneur. I had to figure out a way to make money and do it in an industry I love. So I started this podcast. And that's opportunity that was new to me because of the technology that evolved in order for this podcast to exist, like iTunes, right? Developing the idea of a podcast, like being able to get on Facebook and Instagram and promote myself to be discovered. Google, right, was another tool that you talked about that's important. Like, these are tools I need to be successful. These are tools every podcaster needs to be successful. But what happens when every podcaster needs the same tool and there's only one player or two players that provide that solution? See where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I do. But it didn't happen, right? There's a lot of different platforms that you can
there's two options in like almost every vertical. Like, it's either Spotify or iTunes or Google or Microsoft, or like, in order for me to exist, I need to use one of these giant tech companies.
Well, again, I'm not sure there's anything necessarily nebulous about any of this, other than that it's just how the market works, and there's network effects, and the product that is the best will get used the most, and it will by default then get more of the capital and be able to improve and acquire more customers, and that's just sort of the nature of how the market works. So I don't know if necessarily that's just sort of what happens in most industries, not specific to technology, but really to anything. So I don't know if that's necessarily, a bad thing. I think but the point, so I'm not sure we don't go off the rails here, is that as as an industry, if we're just sticking to, of course, the restaurants here, right? I think what I would urge everyone to do is take 10, 20, 30 minutes out of a day, once a week or something, to think about, like, I wonder what else we could do if I didn't have to do XYZ anymore, right? If this was taken over by AI, and now this job is not needed anymore, what's a new thing that we could do? What would be a result of that? Because those things are going to happen, and it takes a long time, right? And you get, like, this is where startups come in, and this is where new ideas come from. But it doesn't have to be a startup. It can just be like, what in the business that you have, there might be something new that you can do. And instead of looking at, like, well, I'm going to lose this, well, maybe I can actually gain this instead. Dan Simons is a really great restaurant operator, and if you know him, he's got Founding Farmers group in DC, and I always loved his perspective on growth, because it's always a challenge. Just when you scale a restaurant, you can get in this sort of cycle where you have to open up more restaurants because you need more upper mobility for your team, right?
People need to
you
grow.
need more managers. And I asked him about this, and he said, well, it doesn't always need to be new restaurants that create upward mobility. You can create new new businesses within your restaurant. You
Vertical integration.
Yeah, well, and he's sort of positioned as horizontal.
Yeah.
Growth where you can obviously you can create a catering arm, you can create a CPG
Marketing.
arm, you can create a farm, you can, whatever these things are. Where a CSA.
We see that with Zingerman's, right? What they do with the Zingerman's community business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the same can be true as you start to think about like, well, okay, maybe this layer of my business is going to get automated away by AI. So what else could I do with the people that were doing that? I don't know the answer, by the way, but I think that there's some interesting stuff.
Let's bring this back to Meez. So anything that we just talked about, tying it to Meez, things that you're looking to do with Meez. I mean, you talked about, you have like this menu engineering features, you have this costing features, you have this database of ingredients. You look to AI, right? How are you, as the CEO of Meez, how are you thinking about the future of Meez with all of this?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. One, it would be silly for anybody, really anywhere in any industry, not to think about, okay, how can AI improve what we do? And so we do a lot of that, right? And I think a lot about that. I use a lot of AI in my day to day, and we deploy a lot of it into the product as well, and not just into the product, but how we operate. And we're deploying more into the product now to make it faster and more seamless to get all your recipes in. Another thing that I think about is, as we think about this sort of, how quote unquote reporting has existed for restaurants is, there's a lot of reports and a lot of, analytics that you can look at, and then from there decipher kind of what should I do with this information. And I think that we are getting to a place where we can skip that part. And if you have all the data, right, get right to the answers, right? Instead of, waiting for a report and reviewing a report and reviewing all the details of the report, why can't we just tell you, here's the 10 things that if you change these, tweak this price, consolidate this item, buy this instead of this, or stop buying this because you're already buying this. And these 10 things, if you do them, will increase your profit margin or decrease your food cost by 5%.
Yeah.
And as opposed to trying to look at a report every week, just giving you the information. And that's exciting for me. But, for us, we also are always thinking about how do we make the experience of creating, iterating, sharing, and training with your recipes and organizing them. How do we make that better and faster and easier? And so that's always something that we're working on.
Yeah. Josh, thank you so much, man. I've had a lot of fun talking to you today. I had fun exploring the possibilities of our future with you today. You definitely have some cool perspective. I'm super stoked with what you've done with Meez. Congratulations. I feel like you're a great guy. If there's anybody who deserves like the scale that you've had and the success you've had with Meez, it's definitely you. You made you mentioned some names today. Bill Ackman, investor. He's a high hit. If I can get him on the show, I'd love to get Dan Simons on this show. And the last time I connected with you, you called out your former partner or boss. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I think I might have. Yeah, maybe John Rigos from Morify. Yeah, you should definitely talk to him. You know who else you should talk to is because you were just talking about food as medicine. I think you should talk to Seamus Mullen.
Seamus?
Yeah, he's a great chef, and also he found out years ago he got RA and really dedicated a lot of his life now to that premise of food as medicine. He's super smart and also really talented. I think he'd be a great person for you to talk to.
How do you spell his last name?
Mullen. He's out in LA.
Seamus Mullen, look out! I'm coming after you. John Rigos, I'm coming after you. Dan Simons, Bill, look out! I'd love to get you on the show.
I don't know Bill Ackman.
Well, hey.
If you get Bill on, let me know.
That'd be a good get. Anything we should know? Any final thoughts, calls to action, interesting things that you want my listeners to know about Meez before we wrap up?
No, I think we covered a lot of it. What I would say is if you're already using Meez, I am always thirsty for feedback. Right now, I'm actually on a tear of going to every customer I can to get more feedback. I love feedback. I want to know what else can we improve? Where can we keep getting better? So if you're using Meez, you might get an email from me soon. But if you don't, always feel free to reach out to me. And I'd love to hear any feedback about how we can continue to make this the best recipe tool in the world.
Yeah, and I do want to say thank you for the support. Meez has been a sponsor now, like years. I want to say going back to like the last time you were on the show.
I think that's 28 years now. Is that right?
At least 3 or 4 years you've been supporting this podcast. And honestly, when I think about the future of Restaurant Unstoppable and the direction I want to go, it's this. It's partnering with organizations I believe in. And not just the companies, but the people behind those companies that I think are really great people. I think about you and Fred Langley at Restaurant Systems Pro. Before we entered into this 2025 year agreement on sponsorship, I was very transparent. I was like, listen, both of you have like features in your products that are directly like competitive. I was like, I need you to know this before I take your money. And I assumed one of you was going to say, no way, I'm out. But neither of you said that. They said, Eric, we love the work you're doing. We want to support you. Not only did that happen, but now you two know each other and there's the potential of an integration happening, And I think I'm just so stoked to have people like you guys in my corner. And like, I want more. When I say I want freedom of relationships over freedom of money, I want to prioritize. This is what I'm talking about. Is being able to work with companies like Meez and Restaurant Systems Pro. And I just cannot say thank you enough for your support over the years.
I love it. I'm proud of what you've been building, and I'm excited to see you keep building it, man.
Getmeez.com/unstoppable, I believe I should probably figure that out. If that's not the case, I'll correct it in the outro.
Yeah, I think it is. All good.
I'm pretty sure it's getmeez.com/unstoppable.
It's pretty easy to find us. All good.
Support the podcast, use my links. And this is where I say, Josh, my man, there is no questioning. You are unstoppable.
Thanks, brother.
Cheers.